We're seeing already a massive proliferation of chains. I know already dozens of chains have announced, I think about 50 to 60 are in production that we're aware of. And I do think there's something very real here, and there's a need for more chains, and these are filling it.
I'm here today with Steven from Arbitrum, and we have about 10-15 minutes to just talk about Arbitrum Check. So let me jump straight in. First of all, what are you excited about this year in Arbitrum? Obviously, Gelato has launched its rollup as a service platform last year. We are super bullish on many different rollups. We see like this world of 1,000, maybe more rollups. Do you agree with this? Are you also excited about this, or do you see, like, obviously Arbitrum Orbit is a big thing, but yeah, how do you think about this? Do you think in 1 year from now in Denver we will have 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000 Orbit chains live?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm super excited about Arbitrum Orbit, and we're seeing already a massive proliferation of chains. I know already dozens of chains have announced, I think about 50 to 60 are in production that we're aware of. And I do think that there's something very real here, and there's a need for more chains, and these are filling it. I think over time, you're going to see some consolidation probably around verticals. So you'll have your DeFi chains, your NFT chains, and these other chains, and like each vertical, maybe your institutional adoption chains, and whatever verticals emerge that I can't even think of today. But I do think we'll have lots of chains, and I think two things that are going to be interesting. Number one is something that we're building called chain clusters. So I think ultimately you'll have a bunch of different chains that choose to unite and become, in many ways, more like one chain. Not exactly, but closer together with better interop. And I think that they're going to see these chain clusters. So how we think of a chain versus a chain cluster might change over time. Meaning you might have a single chain that looks like a single chain to users, but it's actually backed by kind of like shards, like 5 or 6 different chains. We're going to see that. I also think we're going to start thinking a little bit differently about what a chain is, and that's going to evolve over time. So definitely, I think we're going to see hundreds or thousands of chains. I don't think every chain is going to be a public-facing, general-purpose chain that's marketed to the public. Some may be more background services. Some may be part of clusters, but you are abstracted away from users. But I don't think the chain trend is going away anywhere. I think particularly as adoption is going up, demand is increasing, and we're seeing that happen like rapidly today. We're going to have a need for more chains and better interop in between these chains, because you don't want to fragment the user experience. You want to figure out how to have many chains that work together to give users an incredible experience on Arbitrum and on the blockchain generally.
I agree with that, and it's certainly very interesting what you mentioned, that some of these chains will be essential, but they will not be user-facing anymore. Actually, I see this a lot already, where in the Gelato rollup as a service ecosystem, we have some chains that just focus on verifiable credentials, identity, whatever it is, and they are immediately useful to all the user-facing chains, but they themselves are more like a backend to another chain, right? For example, in the world of zero-gas chains, and actually we at Gelato now have 3 or 4 mainnets going live next month that are all on Arbitrum AnyTrust, and that are all basically zero gas. And now we have this can of worms basically open because of spam issues. And we exactly talked to some other chain providers that are also launching on Gelato Raas, that just take care of having like identity on chain, having other like capture on chain, whatever it is, other mechanisms to help these other chains not get spammed at the end of the day. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the first point, yes. People like to use a chains as servers model. I think in many ways that holds up. You will have chains that are offering these sort of back-end services. And to me, that's actually a good thing, because blockchain technology and smart contracts should be able to basically serve a real-world purpose and make a difference for people, whether or not they're necessarily aware. And the earlier stages of the technology, users are very, very, the user base is very super in tune with the technology and knows a lot about it and cares a lot about it. But I think a sign of broader adoption will be when we can zoom out and we're actually impacting users and helping users that don't even know about it, that were in the background. So one of this, chains sort of offering background services, be it to other chains, be it to applications on my phone that I don't even know about, is, I think, a big step forward for realizing, the power of this technology. And when it comes to fees, like this idea of zero gas chains, gas is important. It's important as a mechanism to really, meter usage and prevent spam. But as you said, there are other ways, particularly when you get to application chains, there are other ways to get that. If you have a chain, it can be secured by Ethereum, but locked down in development. It could be to a specific developer. It could be to KYC'd individuals. It could be rate limited based on identity. There are lots of other ways, to limit resource usage. And, gas is one that's sort of egalitarian and doesn't need identity because everyone's paying for their resources, but there are lots of other ways to see as well. And it's exciting to see with Gelato and other, developers that you're working with building Orbit chains, how they're thinking about this and how they're experimenting and how they're taking, the same base stack that's powering the Arbitrum public chains and customizing it and using it in different ways. So incredible to see.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And actually at Gelato, we have been grappling with the problem of gas abstraction for many years. We have our Relay API. Part of this has been used on Arbitrum 1 by Connex and others. And I think I really early on realized that the benefit of gas, as in it's a mechanism to prevent spam, is really shouldn't hold us hostage, because the gas spam protection mechanism works better the more expensive it is. The less expensive it is, the less the spam mechanism also works. Like you see this on Solana, right? So actually I think it's completely incentive misaligned as a mechanism with you as a developer, because it wants you to be very expensive for users. And so ultimately, I think we need other solutions, really, at the end of the day. I already stopped thinking of gas as a good solution for this. And I think that's where we see a lot of room for innovation still in our space. Super bullish on projects that are innovating on that front, bringing, proof of uniqueness, proof of personhood, or whatever is on-chain, to help prevent spam on these zero gas environments.
Yeah, so it's interesting. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have EIP 4844 go live. And one thing that's going to happen, I think, it's going to really put this conversation about gas into the forefront, because today on rollups like Arbitrum 1, the vast majority of fees is spent on data availability. There's also the layer 2 fee portion, but people don't pay attention to that because it's dwarfed by this larger thing. But when that larger thing goes away, I think people are going to say, okay, what's left? And now different rollups take very different approaches to gas sustainability and gas metering on layer 2. But it's very cool to experiment with other things like identity. I think there are great solutions there. But absent of that, you do need some gas for sustainability and anti-spam, because if you're charging 0 and now the layer 1 fees are going down also, you're going to find that you can just utilize layer 2 resources for free. It's going to incentivize spam and people misusing the chain and really DOSing the chain in the worst case. So Arbitrum 1 has always been priced not the lowest on layer 2, and intentionally to be a prevention mechanism in the gas there. So I think that's a conversation that's going to come to the forefront, because there are definitely going to be chains out there say, look, we're cheaper now. And it's going to be like, yes, but we could be cheaper. This chain could be cheaper, but its community has chosen to be sustainable. But to your point, if there are other mechanisms that can do this, particularly chains that have identity, or other ways where you can have some sort of digital passport or the like that help you meter and help you stop this spam and denial of service problem, those are fantastic things to explore. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about Orbit, which you guys at Gelato are really helping to see come to fruition, is this experimentation and doing things that are different in a production environment, and trying things and experimenting is important. And make sure you do it like safely, and security in mind is important. But that's why it's great to have excellent partners working on this.
Yeah, and actually, to be fair, I always like to. I've been in this space for a long time, and sometimes I get a bit bored and I want to try new things. But there's certainly still, I think, a wide array of use cases for having gas, like maybe the more DeFi-oriented use cases. Maybe the use cases that are just simply closer to Ethereum still, because if you are close to Ethereum, gas won't go away, right? Like, I'm sure you wouldn't recommend any trust to any type of project, right? Like, there's probably some projects that should still remain on Ethereum as their DA layer and so on. So yeah, like I was thinking probably more of a handful of projects that I'm recently talking to, where it's like they're building a game, they're building something completely new, and they don't need to pay so much to Ethereum. But yeah, they also then lose certain aspects about security and reliability and whatnot. So there's certainly other use cases where I also wouldn't recommend that, and they should still have these higher payments to have better censorship resistance and whatnot.
Absolutely. So, people actually, when Arbitrum Nova was initially created, that was the first antitrust chain, we'd get this question of like, why would you tell people not to use a rollup? Why would you create this technology? And the answer is different paths are better, different technology is better for different use cases. So, we're not telling DeFi projects to move over. If you're a DeFi project and you're paying a couple of cents for a fee, even for like a $10 trade, that's probably okay. And like you belong in Arbitrum 1. But, people also have to be pragmatic. A game where every time, if you have an on-chain game, every time you do something on-chain, you pay a couple of cents. Game's supposed to be fun. That's not going to be very fun if every time your wallet's being drained. So the idea is, this is for different people, different solutions for different people. And these game developers weren't saying, okay, I get, they weren't saying we're going to build an Arbitrum 1. They're saying Arbitrum 1 doesn't work for me. We're going to go and build on a side chain at a time that's much less secure, and they're going to give up that. So our goal was, hey, can we cater to these people too? Can we offer them something that A, meets their practical needs, and B, has high security? It's better than what they're going to get in a side chain. So sometimes you have to be practical and pragmatic and understand that, like, it's not like if you just said, oh, we're not building this, they're just going to all, just bite the bullet and go ahead and they go, okay, fine, we'll go to Arbitrum 1. It's like, no, it doesn't work for them. It works great for DeFi, works great for high value NFTs, but for gaming and social applications, I think they need something different. And this is true generally for data availability layers. There's a proliferation of different options. The Arbitrum stack is modular. You can plug in any trust. You can plug in rollup data availability. You can plug in, eigenlayers, Celestia. You can plug in Espresso. And the idea is it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Different projects have to figure out what's best for them. And it's a hard problem. That's why it's important to have, people like you that understand the landscape and can advise projects. And we do this as well. This is probably the best, combination for you.
Exactly. I guess we're just broadening the addressable market here. And we're not, and I think that's really cool to have different approaches for a vastly different user base, essentially. And also getting more developers into crypto that simply weren't able to join before because it was too expensive or not scalable enough for them. Yeah. Cool. So another topic, big one. You already mentioned it before. But yeah, when we have all of these chains, they also somehow need to interoperate and talk to each other, at least some of them, not all of them actually. People sometimes also overthink this a bit. I think there's a whole lot of chains that don't need synchronous composability with any other chain, right? But there's also a lot of chains that definitely benefit from this. So what's Arbitrum's approach here? I think looking at all the different rollup stacks, OP, Polygon, whatever it is, they currently all have different approaches. They aren't very well defined yet. So how are you thinking about this? I've heard that you're working with Espresso on shared sequencing. How do you think about the asynchronous composability part? How far will that get us? How do you think about the synchronous composability part, shared sequencing? And how do you predict will this look like in 2 or 3 years from now?
Yeah, so a few things. On synchronous composability, I think we're doing our best to get extra scaling factors on chain. So we're building Arbitrum Stylus, which does a lot of things. Number one, it allows you to code on chain synchronously with Solidity applications, but also now in Rust and C and C++. You can bring in legacy libraries as well, all synchronously with Solidity contracts, same storage format. You don't know the difference on chain. But it's also a scaling solution. So now you're going to get roughly 10x scaling factor in computation, 100x in memory. So a really big improvement for the synchronous environment. And we also think about asynchronous communication, but asynchronous communication is not all created equally. Can we have fast asynchronous communication that sort of, ties chains together? So I mentioned before chain clusters as a way where chains can sort of, tie themselves closer together, have more shared liquidity so they can tap into, and they'll need to trust each other for this. That's why we don't think it's a solution for everyone. There are those out there that think there should be one super cluster for everyone. We don't believe this. We think that should be opt-in to cluster yourself, to govern yourself. But that's one thing. Shared sequencing is another technology that's very, very important here. And this, like you mentioned, we're working with Espresso on what we can do with shared sequencing, particularly across different sequencing policies. Arbitrum ecosystem has a sequencer that doesn't allow front running, and how can you, and there's also talk in this time boost policy, how can you build this in a decentralized way and also share infrastructure with others. And shared sequencing allows you to do things like conditional inclusion, where okay, we're only going to include transaction A in this chain if transaction B is included in this chain, and you can naturally build bridging on top of there. And there's also, of course, all the excellent bridging projects. So projects like Layer 0, like Chainlink CCIP, like Across, like Connects, which you mentioned before, like Hop. There are so many of these protocols, and similar to chains themselves, there's a proliferation of this technology, and there's also different angles. There's there's shared sequencing, there's bridging protocols, there's protocols like chain clustering that we're talking about. they all sort of bite at this problem a little bit, but I think altogether we're going to come with good solutions, and it's going to be a mix. You might have chains that are clustered, and then we'll have to talk about, okay, how do different clusters talk to each other? So I think you're going to need all these solutions to work together, and that's what we think. We want to empower the broader community of innovation. We're building some things ourselves at Off-Chain Labs, like clustering technology, but this is not to the exclusion of these other things. We're contributing to Espresso to help build their shared sequencing technology, but I also think third-party bridges have a very, very big part of this story as well.
Cool. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, so, I mean, basically in a nutshell, you have a heterogeneous sort of view where it's like, okay, it's not that opinionated. You can have different clusters. They do different things. But like, because I sometimes struggle, some approaches seem to think that every rollup will be part of the same shared sequencer, and I just don't see how this will scale. Like, it seems pretty crazy if we were really talking about, I don't know, millions of rollups at some point. So yeah, do you think it will be more like you will have different clusters with different shared sequencing models? Within these clusters, you can do synchronous calls or whatnot, like maybe you have a DeFi cluster on Arbitrum, right? Where you really want to share the liquidity amongst different chains.
Yeah, so when it comes to clusters, the thing, and this is the same thing, you may have heard the term super chain, it's the same idea. You get basically worst of all security. That's the downside. The chains can get benefits from clustering, but you're very limited in your customizability, because if this chain's putting its technology, it's a roll up and it's putting all its data on Ethereum, but chain B is actually using an alternative data availability. If you cluster together, if you join the same super chain, and there's a failure in chain B's data availability, it's going to pollute chain A, right? Because you're basically allowing transfers faster than the settlement time, and you can do things like, there's some attack here, you throw the bag there, and you can really, create pollution. That's why chain clusters really need to trust one another. That's why we don't believe in this one super chain cluster for everyone, because it limits customizability, because you basically end up on a single technology stack, and we're seeing this in other ecosystems and say, hey, everyone needs to run this same code, but I want to customize in this way, and I want to use this DA, and I want to include this cool feature in my chain, and sorry, we can't just vet everyone, and it sort of pollutes everyone. You have this worst of all model. So I think clustering is best in many, many, many groups. But then there is technology where you don't have to trust fully the other chain. That's where shared sequencing technology actually, I think, can bridge. A system like Espresso can take on many chains, and they don't necessarily need to trust each other deeply. They just need to be sequenced by the same party. And the failure cases of the sequencer, doing something bad, or if it's decentralized, it's limited. But if it's, even in the centralized case, it's can reorder transactions. That's typically going to be visible. So I think where shared sequencing, you can have a much larger set. And that's actually one of the reasons why we chose to, at Off-Chain Labs, to contribute to Espresso rather than building it ourselves. Because I understood that we could build this ourselves. They're a fantastic team. We also have a great team. We could build this ourselves. But if we build a shared sequencing technology at Off-Chain Labs, the other ecosystems aren't going to use it. And with Espresso, we thought, hey, these guys are a neutral player. Can we contribute to their efforts? So maybe other rollups can, because ultimately I think if we can get past the barriers of each rollup stack, sort of limiting to its own little cluster, but find ways to, cluster's the wrong word because that means something here technically, but if we're all in our separated groups, if we can find ways to bridge that gap, I think shared sequencing is one of those technologies that can be applied broadly if we align on some neutral technology that can actually connect not only many Arbitrum chains, but across Ethereum. And the real goal here is to have a unified Ethereum, not a unified Arbitrum corner, a unified Ethereum. And unified Arbitrum part is part of that, but it's really much, much broader than that. And that's my goal as an Ethereum maxi, besides for an Arbitrum maxi, is really to see that happen as well.
Great. So I think that's a great note to finish this small interview on, a unified Ethereum. That's what we're working on here at ETHDenver in 2024. Thanks a lot, Steven.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.